No ordinances, no public hearings, and with that we move on to the meat and potatoes of tonight's agenda. The discussion action items 11.1, adopt a resolution approving a consulting services agreement with PMC for preparation of an EIR for the Clay Street Cedar Ravine Realignment project. And with that, Mr. Rivas, you're up.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. I'll just start with some background on the project. The Clay Street at Main Street Cedar Ravine Realignment, the Clay Street Bridge Replacement Project over at Hangtown Creek, was approved by the City Council back on February the 8th of 2011. And in conjunction with approving the project, the Council also adopted a mitigated negative declaration and a mitigation monitoring reporting program in accordance with the California Environmental Quality Act. Following the Council's action, an action was filed in the Superior Court by the Friends of Historic Hangtown seeking a writ of mandamus from the court to set aside those approvals. The court held a hearing on September 2nd of 2011, and on February the 14th of 2012, the court did issue a order granting petition of writ of mandate in favor of the petitioners, basically setting aside the approval of the project and the adoption of the mitigated negative deck, requiring that the city then pursue an environmental impact report. The court basically directed that certain potential impacts are to be evaluated in the EIR, and those included traffic, parking impacts, urban decay impacts, biological impacts, cultural resources impacts, toxic impacts, aesthetic impacts, growth-inducing impacts, and inconsistency with area plans and policies. On May 14th of 2013, the City Council directed the staff proceed with the design phase, look at all options equally, and prepare sufficient documentation to proceed with the EIR. And we have provided a copy of those minutes in the staff report for your reference. And this also was one of the three options that was considered, resulting from the April 30th, 2013 neighborhood chat. Proposals were received from 3 different environmental consulting firms, and it was staff's opinion that PMC, with their scope of work, schedule, and cost estimate that are attached to the exhibit, were found to be superior and in approach and best understood the project. So they were selected to prepare the environmental impact report. They're proposing to complete the work under a budget of $155,994. With that proposal, if you look at the tasks involved, there are a number of tasks of doing the EIR, including project startup, the notice of preparation. They would then prepare an administrative draft EIR. They're also looking at revising the traffic impact report. And that'll be done by a subconsultant, Fear and Peers. There will be time for city review of the administrative draft. They will then revise the administrative draft and the administrative draft traffic report in accordance with staff comment. There'll be then a further city review. They will then prepare and publish a draft environmental impact report for public review. Following a 45-day of that public review, they would then prepare an administrative draft final EIR and traffic report. There'll then be further city review of that document, revise the administrative final EIR, and prepare and publish the final EIR for certification by the council. Also included in that, which is very, very important, is they're including in task 11, I want to point out to the council, is a public outreach. That was something that your council at the last meeting had requested, that there be further outreach to the general public. They are proposing to do that. There will be one hearing that will be conducted by PMC as part of the scoping meeting. They have 2 additional meetings that they'll propose. One will probably hold during the traffic. Once we have the traffic results, we would then look at the various different alternatives that we have for the intersection. And we also have the ability at our discretion to have them do additional impacts, or I'm sorry, do additional hearings or meetings with the general public for about $1,500 to $2,000 per meeting per the council's direction. So I think there's a lot of opportunity to have a lot of different input from the public throughout the process, so that we have an EIR that is sufficient, providing the council with full disclosure on the impacts, so you can make an informed decision on the project. So with that, we're recommending that you approve the contract as proposed, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you have at this time.
Okay, thank you very much. I think I'm going to go first, and I'd like to frame the conversation for tonight's discussion. And piggybacking on what Mr. Rivas had to say, there are 2 points that I think we need to clearly recognize. In thinking about proceeding with improvements to this intersection, I understand that we need more concrete data to make an informed decision. I know this is a contentious issue, and moving forward, our decision will not be what we personally like or how we feel about this intersection. Our decision will be based on what is right for the whole community given the information provided. Therefore, we need some more data. We will need to know what the impacts are on Pacific Street in Bedford with all the traffic control options. And we will need a more detailed plan for parking that came out of that last go-around. So all this quantitative information will be a part of the EIR. And second, we clearly recognize that we were mandated by the court to proceed with an EIR before we approve a project at this intersection. And the action before us tonight is asking this council to follow through on that court order. That said, I personally believe we will need to make an adjustment to this resolution. As you said, on May 14th, this council directed staff to, and I quote, proceed with a design phase looking at all options equally and prepare sufficient documentation to proceed with an EIR. As it stands in the staff report, to me, the recommendation tonight does not seem to satisfy this action. So I'd like to clarify that in a resolution as we move forward. Because in thinking about design workshops, it's important to wrap the design phase inside the EIR process. I know the last time we met on May 14th, we had authorized staff to proceed with the design workshop. But I think that a staff has highlighted that is what we will be doing in this EIR process. I just like to clarify that in the resolution. This way, community feedback is an integral part of the process. And that's much better than us holding workshops on our own where the process doesn't have any teeth and then we proceed with an EIR. It makes sense to wrap it up inside the process, and I want to make sure we do that tonight. I did have a question, Pierre. Under Task 11, it states that 2 group meetings will be held with key stakeholders. Who are those stakeholders? Is that a public process? Is that a private process where certain people are invited? Can you kind of describe what does a key stakeholder mean?
I actually talked with the principal with PMC just to make sure that we were all on the same page as to what exactly that meant. When you look at the first meeting that's proposed as part of the notice of preparation process, that's a more general meeting with the public. So it's stakeholders, meaning those that are very directly affected by the project, and of course the public in general that are interested in the project and the EIR process. So it's to solicit basically what the public feels are impacts that may be imposed through implementation of the project so that it's covered in the EIR. With respect to those focused workshops, then basically that's looking at, or what we mean by stakeholders is, for example, one of the stakeholders would be those businesses that are directly affected by the project, by construction. And so the whole idea was that the consultant and we'll be able to facilitate their concerns so that those issues then are directly addressed and then addressed in the scoping, addressed in the EIR in terms of mitigating those impacts. So it's during the process. So in other words, probably some of those, or at least one of those, we foresee taking place after the conclusion of Fear and Peers doing the traffic update, because then we're going to know what the impacts are from a traffic standpoint of all the different alternatives, and then we'll look at identifying what exactly, how we can further mitigate those impacts from the different alternatives. By
having that concrete data, we'll be able to have a very meaningful discussion on
on
what all the options mean to the business owners and to the community based on that data.
Exactly, and I don't know if I'm explaining it very well, but it's very, very focused on very specific issues as opposed to, well, this is the EIR process, and right now we're just trying to get general comments on what needs to be included in the EIR. This is the chance to look at very focused issues.
Okay, so how do you see Council's action from May 14th of proceeding with the design phase, how do you see that being implemented within the EIR process?
I'm not exactly sure what you mean.
We directed staff on May 14th to proceed with the design phase, looking at all options equally and prepare sufficient documentation to proceed with an EIR. Do you see, perhaps, Mr. Morris, do you have an answer to that?
Let me see if I can help with that. Because I think I was one that, based on comments from the public, said let's look at doing these design workshops. We can't do the design workshop. We can't design the project until we know what the project is.
Okay.
You have asked us to do 3 equal alternatives for the project at that intersection in the EIR. So we can't do the design until we know what we're designing. Now, there are some components in there that no matter what the project is at the intersection will be the same, and we can do some design. For example, what happens to the parking and the farmers market, assuming that we go with a project that realigns Clay Street to meet up with Cedar Ravine. That's something that will happen, you know, no matter what happens at the intersection if we decide to realign. So we can look at those components of how we would design the farmers market, how we would design the new parking lot where additional parking would be, et cetera. So those are components that we can do during this process, and that's why if we think we need additional meetings to address things like that, design meetings, we're open to doing that. And as Pierre mentioned, we can do additional meetings to answer that question. But the answer kind of is, you know, we can look at different designs and things, but we can't design the project until we know what the project is. And we won't know that until the EIR is finished and has identified the 3 alternatives, and the council directs us, this is what we want you to design.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for clarifying that. That's all the questions I have for now. Vice Mayor Hagan?
I don't have any questions this time.
Okay. Councilmember Wilkins?
I don't have any questions.
Councilmember Borelli?
Nor do I.
Councilmember Patton?
Nor do I.
All right. With that, we will open it up for public comment. Please come forward, state your name for the record, and limit your comments to 3 minutes.
Hello,
Good evening.
I'm Phil Berry. I think that you've got the cart before the horse. It seems to me you're asking the EIR folks to design the project. I don't think you've given them specific enough direction as to what you're looking at. At the last meeting, you were going to have some public meetings and presumably some action of the council to come up with some alternatives that they can deal with in the EIR. You're asking the folks writing the EIR to design the project. In other words, where the parking goes and all of that. I think you're doing it backwards. So I think you may have made up your mind tonight, but it is backwards.
Thank you, Mr. Berry.
Okay. Kirk Smith, I agree with Mr. Berry about putting the cart before the horse, and I agree with you, Mayor, about the need to get information, to separate your personal views and get facts. And that's why I think that in the past there may have been some errors in judgments, like putting the City Hall up for sale without realizing that that was an extraordinarily hated gesture in the city, or going after the historic Hangman Street building without knowing that the public doesn't like that gesture. I agree with Mr. Berry that the prudent thing would be that you come up with a design first, or at least limit it, and then you could be able to spend that $155,000 more wisely, because it would be used for the purpose you described and not merely to get one of the threshold requirements of being able to push whatever some people might on a personal level want. So as a public service, I thought I would recommend a referendum, because then you'd get the chance. Now, some of you have used polling services for elections and things of that kind, but the other part of the democratic process would be a referendum where you put it on the ballot. And as a public service, my phone number is 530-503-7400. The post office box is 654 Placerville. I'll be glad to spend up to $3,000, and I'm sure I can find lots of others who'd be glad to get the signatures to help put that on the ballot. And that way, you'll be fully informed, because I'm not sure that the council quite gets the message, because they look around at the usual cast of characters and they get the idea that this is just the only people that care about it. But I can tell you that the anger over the turnabout, and then it also gives you a chance, the public, to learn things like, well, what are the names of the developers who have projects now that would be advanced by having Clay Street widened? What would be the position of Marshall Hospital that has a lot of property just up the street, as well as certainly the main campus? Do they have a position on the turnabout? We would, through the electoral process, have a chance to debate those kinds of things and maybe come up with, if there's a need, for some preliminary plans first. But I think the referendum would be a great thing, unless some of you want to have a polling process to find out how incredibly hated this is. You know, there are people that still want to have a recall over the selling of the city hall. Imagine, with so many people who care about the history of this town, who told you that in the town hall meeting you wisely initiated. They said that history of this city, this special place on earth, is the biggest thing that they had, that was why they valued this community. And the second thing when it came, and the first thing when it came to what are the highest priority, was historic preservation. So destroying the landscape of this city that's been around for so long, I think you'd find was far beyond whatever shows up for a meeting. And that's why the referendum sounds like a great idea, so you could get the facts that you wisely, seek. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith.
Kathleen Newell, Shingle Springs resident. I'd just like to say that I concur with Mr. Berry and Mr. Smith's sentiments, and that you are putting the cart before the horse, and that we need to know what the project is going to be before you do an EIR. The other thing is, as you mentioned, that the workshops would only include the business owners around the project site. I think that's a bad idea. I think everybody needs to be included in all the workshops. Everybody uses that street. We're all going to be affected. And that's all. I ask that you vote no tonight to approve this funding. $155,000 doesn't seem like enough to cover an EIR. I'm thinking they're going to come back and hit you with some more money. And then I think at the end, you're going to have to do another one, because someone's going to challenge you on the fact that it wasn't done for the site-specific project. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Kathleen. Good evening.
Good evening. I'm Earl Washburn. I'm a 36-year resident of Placerville, and I'm affected by this item because I use the Clay Street Bridge every week, both as a pedestrian and as a driver. I attended the open meeting that you had, and I heard a lot of the anger that was alluded to by Mr. Smith, and I think much of it is misplaced. I stand here tonight to urge the City Council to vote yes on this item and move ahead. Essentially, the people who opposed this project went to court and got the court to say that you needed an EIR, and now they're up here opposing the EIR. Let us go ahead and get the EIR. Let the EIR look at all the various options that are available to us. Let's have the open meeting, as Pierre most clearly announced, and let us have the facts in front of us, and then the city will be able to make a decision that makes sense. On a personal note, I grew up with a roundabout in Stockton that worked great. I think the roundabout would be a wonderful idea, and I support that. But in any event, let us get all the facts on the various options, and then we would be in a position to make a best decision. So I urge you to vote yes on this item. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Washburn. Good evening.
Evelyn Veerkamp, Placerville. I'm not going to urge you to do anything because I'm convinced that you already know what you're going to do. The die has been cast. I would support those people, however, who say that those who oppose the city's direction number many more than those of us who are here. I have personally spoken with very few people, actually a total of one, who supports what you're doing. In April at the neighborhood chat, a question was asked and never answered, and that was, what is the problem you're trying to address? There was not an answer then, and there's not an answer now. We've heard things like, well, it'll improve air quality because the roundabout will speed up traffic. I would counter that it might speed up traffic to get to the Bedford intersection where they'll wait a great deal longer. I don't believe that that's a legitimate reason, because as many times as I've used that, what I would call an existing roundabout, I never have a problem. I've occasionally, like maybe once or twice or 3 times, or let me just really give you the benefit of the doubt and say a dozen times, although I'm lying, but a dozen times I've seen what I might call minor congestion there. By minor congestion, I mean people who might have had to wait, say, a half a minute. But I have waited at major intersections a much longer time than that, and I've certainly waited at the Bedford intersection much longer than that. So I discount that as a valid reason for proceeding. I've also heard that the Clay Street Bridge is inadequate. I would ask, inadequate for what? Is there a developer who's needing his property to get on with the job, and in order to do that he needs a bigger bridge? I don't know. What I do know is that I don't know anybody who's been able to answer the question, why are we going ahead with this? As I say, you were asked that on April 30th and you did not answer. There actually were 4 alternatives that we were left with after April 30th, and one was to do nothing. That alternative has dropped off the agenda. So we're now going ahead with 3 alternatives, all of which include doing something, for which reason we do not know. Beyond that, the only thing that I would like to ask is, and I think this has been somewhat addressed already, and that is about the public workshops. From the notes that we had in the agenda packet, it seems to be that nobody quite knows when those will be fit in. But I would like to know how many public workshops there will be, and if they will even matter. If it will be a chance for the public to make an input into the process, or if it's simply fulfilling a requirement that you speak to us and get us out of your hair, so to speak. Finally, I think the only other question I have is, and that's something which is not in any of these printed notes, will eminent domain ever arise in this situation? Will you need to take any property in order to, for example, complete the roundabout to make it large enough, because I'm assuming a roundabout will go ahead. To do the Clay Street Bridge, will you need to take any property? Will there be any threat of eminent domain to anybody?
Let's get that answered right now. First of all,
and it'll be a great deal easier because there's a bill before the Senate in California to make eminent domain easier for you. Okay, thank you.
Let's get that answered. And first of all, I greatly challenge you that there is no assumption of a roundabout.
I ask.
That there is absolutely none. So,
roundabout is out.
No, there's no presumption that that is going to occur. We are looking at all options.
Yes, I understand that.
So let's not presume a roundabout. We're looking at all options. And Mr. Rivas, is eminent domain, has that been entered into the conversation as part of this project?
To my understanding, no.
No. So I've never heard any part of eminent domain as part of this process. Mr. Morris, can you confirm that?
No, none. If, like you say, that we're looking at all options equally, if the roundabout were the option that we're chosen, the property around there primarily is that parking lot that might have to encroach upon, but that's city-owned property.
Okay. So. All right. That's good to get answered.
So it probably, almost certainly, 99% won't happen.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry.
No problem. Take your time. Good evening.
Hi, Fran Duchamp. I have one question. As a double art major who spent 8 years of their life designing or studying history, can you please explain to me why you cannot design something? Where it was said, we can't design something till we know what it is. You basically know the options. Is that correct?
We're looking at 4 different types of traffic.
Okay, and so that's my question is sir, you had said we can't design it. Why?
Would you like to answer that?
Thank you, Mayor. What I'm saying is, we want to design the final option, the final design.
Yes.
We have 4 things to design. We don't want to design all 4 of them because it's very expensive to do
Well,
that
even if you,
design.
and I'm sorry for interrupting, but even if you did a light sketch of each one, it's not where you can't do it, is that correct?
We have the light sketches already.
Okay, but
But
you
we're
had,
talking about is additional detail that will require a lot more work to get into the specifics of what each of those
you're
designs
working
will
off a
take.
computer program?
We've been years on this process, and we do have sketches, we do have renderings. We're taking this, the final step to really understand all the data and how traffic plays with each of these models. So it's not just a matter of what's a sidewalk going to look like with these different models.
No, I totally understand.
Right.
I did a lot of the history in Europe,
Sure.
and so that's why I'm asking. Also, I've lived in Mexico, and I've seen roundabouts, and this is a very small space, and I don't think it'll work. And like you said, maybe that's not even an option. Also, I worked at the school up here, and I've never hit traffic, and you've got to think that I came when all the parents came, and you would think if there was going to be any kind of traffic, it would be there. But that kind of struck me odd, is that you couldn't design something. Sure you could. So thank you.
All right, thank you, Fran. Any other public comment? Good evening again.
Yeah, it's just me again. Barry Batchelor from Smith Flat. I would suggest if you people want to take the egg off your face, that you put these 4 options on a ballot. I spent many a Saturday up at the Cosmic, and after all that time, I only had 2 people, and now maybe 3 that are for a roundabout.
I object to being pointed to like that. Address them.
Please reserve your comments toward this council, Mr.
Objection
Batchelor.
accepted. It is not a popular thing, and I think if you put it on the ballot, you're going to find that out. If you put 4 options up there, do this, do this, do this, do nothing, you'll be surprised what you're going to come up with. And that egg on your face might just kind of disappear, because it's getting hard-boiled now, kids.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening, Mary Donkey. I came here tonight to be enlightened because since April 30th, I've been waiting and waiting and waiting for these workshops that were supposed to take place so that the community at large, the business owners, and those of us who will be impacted by what we do with Clay Street and the Cedar Ravine intersection, I was under the impression when I left that town hall that was standing room only, that we were going to be involved with rough drafts. Obviously, we can't come up with the formal plans, but input. And it just hasn't been there. And now I'm told that staff is going to do the design and present it for consideration in the EIR. Am I correct? Is that what I've been hearing? That
I
you've
think I addressed that in my opening comments.
I
Yeah,
came in at a
we-
quarter after, so I do apologize for that. But I just have heard some really good solutions here to go forward so we don't have another situation where we feel like we're not being represented. And with all due respect for the gentleman who saw a roundabout in Stockton that he liked, Stockton is not Placerville. We have a history here that we want to protect. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening, Council, Mayor Thomas. I'm here to speak a moment for citizens of past procedures. As you may know, I was part of the process a number of years ago when the Cottonwood subdivision was proposed, and it was a very large subdivision yet to be completed. And it went through a great number of public processes with a great number of Placerville citizens participating. And it was very clear that there would be effects from those new neighborhoods opened up, and one of the main conduits for traffic would be from Clay Street to Main Street, which was already highly impacted by traffic. As a condition of approval and a mitigation for that traffic, it was agreed that the bridge and the intersection be improved. That was a commitment to the citizens of Placerville. That was not an idea brought up by someone in a frivolous moment of liberal ecstasy. That was part of a document that mitigated those impacts for all of the people who live in that neighborhood. And yes, probably a decade and a half later, I moved to that neighborhood. So I am a daily user as well as a past participant in process. I have made this point before in front of the City Council, but I think it's very worthy of being made once again to the public at large, is that every objection that I've heard from members of the objecting public this evening has been voiced repeatedly and with an extreme amount of anger and frustration over the Placerville Trail, Main Street improvements, the period light poles, removing the Cobra heads and installing the historic light poles, the Highway 50 project that took down the chain link fence. I was told personally that I was ruining the business climate of Main Street, that no one would ever come there again, that traffic would, or parking would be so impacted and it would be so ugly. The station at Mosquito Road, there's countless numbers of what Placerville residents feel are positive amenities to the town that they love, that have gone through the process that you're slugging your way through at the moment. But a decision was made to improve the city, to make it look better and work better. And I hope you do that, because what I'm hearing from the audience is not advocating that. But I think the rest of us who use those areas daily would appreciate those improvements that were voted for and they had trust that you would do a number of years ago.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening, Sue Taylor. I have lots of fun ideas. I think we could go in a direction rather than this direction. You know, I remember, Wendy, you came to taxpayers to speak, and I asked you if the public was against this project, would you give it up? I mean, basically, would you stop? And you said, absolutely. But we have to find out first. And so you had a public meeting, and there was a huge outcry of frustration on this project. And again, I asked, will you drop this? And you said, with the rest of the council, that let's give it one more try. Let's put out some designs out there, because you really felt that if we saw something that we felt good about, then the public would embrace this. Now we're doing a full EIR. Really? And we all know that an EIR is based on a project with the intent to move forward with that project. It kind of clouds the whole openness and relationship that I think what was happening and where we were going, when now we stepped into now we're in a legal function of just the task to get this project through, and you do it through an EIR. I think there's lots of different ways we could do design. I'm doing the design standards for Missouri Flat because we've talked about them for 5 years, and so I finally just volunteered to help get them done, and I'm actually doing that for them. And then they bring like 5 different consultants that ask me, well, Sue, what can we do to help you? All these paid consultants. It's just, stop paying for consultants and listen to the people that are asking you to listen to them. Bring out the high school students with chalk, and let's draw this stuff all over the area over there, and let's see what it ends up looking like. And then let's all take a vote. Okay, that's not going to happen. So, I look at the amount of money that we're talking about spending, and I think of all the things you could use that to do. And even I think the mitigation money for the Cottonwood was around $70,000. I thought, what a cool walking bridge you could put the sidewalks extend beyond the bridge. You could get a little cute walking bridge that goes down Clay Street on each side of the existing bridge. I'm looking at all the impacts that you're going to have to deal with. I was told before I got here that this is just talking about the design. We're just going to move forward with the design. And now that I'm reading this and looking at it, we're basically, what you're saying is you're going to address the traffic impacts, parking, urban decay, biological, cultural, toxic, aesthetic, growth-inducing, and inconsistency with the area plans and policies. You can't do that, in my mind, for $156,000. And I think you'd be much better to take some money, hire someone that knows how to draw pictures, bring it before the public, and if there's anything there that we feel has substance and the public goes along, that's great. Then put it up for a vote. As the other speakers talked about, instead of pushing it on the public, let the public be a part of the process. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Sue. Good evening.
Hello, my name is David Price. And, you know, I just don't know where to go with this. We've been talking about this for 3 years, and I don't know what else I could say to even remotely change your opinion. So really, I think what's been said tonight is the only thing we could possibly do to do the right thing is to put this to the vote of the people. There is no other options. There's no amount of money that you can spend. You can't pay for the opinions and expect the people to believe what you have showed them with that. There's nothing we can do. There is no common ground. We have to bring this to a vote. And to pretend like you hear me say this and then you turn your head and ignore it doesn't make the people feel any better about this. It either will be brought to a vote by the city council, or the people will bring a referendum petition or an ordinance initiative petition to the people ourselves. And that will only make you look bad, because the people will be angry that you have been told repeatedly, please bring this to the vote of the people. You know, the mayor right now has said that there was no support for the roundabout, at least. And I believe that, Wendy, you know that there's very little support for this project, period. There are some people that have properties, possibly some businesses where people will benefit. But the vast majority of the people in this city will not benefit from this project whatsoever. It will only make our downtown area more congested. It will take away parking. It will take away the small town atmosphere of our city. And we have basically done everything other than come up and beg on our knees to the city council to listen to us. We've had this place overflowing with people saying we don't want the project at all. Now, we've compromised, which is what we want. We want to work with the city, and we would love to have some little bridges for pedestrians to walk through. We'd like to have the bridge, if it's unsafe without railings, we'd like to have railings put on. We'd like to have the street lowered and repaved. But we don't want to increase the traffic for the benefit of a few. And it's not going to be the mass of the people. Now, I've stood out with Barry and many other people at the Cosmic Cafe. Granted, a lot of those people are obviously going to be against the project because the farmers market's there. But that's not the vast majority. I mean, the rest of the town I have spoke with, because I was involved in the anti-redevelopment project, and I've spoke with people because they thought at first, they go, well, is this about the roundabout and Clay Street? No, this is redevelopment agency. But they brought it up, and I talked to them anyway. So we've been out there. We know where your constituents stand on this, and They're not in favor of it. So rather than waste another $150,000 you've already spent, I don't know, $300,000, $400,000, $500,000, just bring this to a vote. For $50,000, you could make the nicest ballot you could ever put on there. Just make it fair for both sides and put it to the people. Because it's the people you keep saying you're trying to represent here, but no people want it. We've got 2 people that spoke in favor of it tonight. And, you know, I could go on and on. You know where I stand personally. I'm just trying to make this so we can get on to other things and we can work for our city together rather than against each other. This is going to go on for another year. I've been doing this for 3 years. I was one of the people that helped save the Herrick building. You know, I mean, I'm tired of fighting the city. I want to work with the city, and I want to get us to all be a prosperous community. And all we're doing is tearing each other's throats out right now because we're arguing and fighting constantly about this. So do you want to drag it out for another year, or would you just put it to the vote of the people? I know, and I'm sorry for carrying on, but probably you know, and I know that you're going to lose. But at least you'll let the people do it themselves, and they'll tell you. So I hope you consider that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Price. Any other final comments? Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Tiffany Amy. I am a new resident of Placerville, though I grew up in Somerset, so it's
welcome.
not too far. Thank you. This is my first city council meeting I've ever attended, and I actually came because of the roundabout issue. I know I'm not highly educated, but I will say a lot of the arguments I have heard, a lot of them are based on personal opinion, which you're not going to avoid. Everyone's got their own personal opinion. In terms of roundabouts being used in other cities, that's an invalid comment in my experience, because I've been in numerous cities, many of which utilize roundabouts or other types of intersections, and I've never really seen the benefit of a roundabout versus any other intersection. The other concern I have is for how small the area is. You can't deny how much you're going to have to take out in order to put in the roundabout. So what is the long-term actual effect that the roundabout's going to have for the traffic of the community? The only thing I can think of that can really benefit is during winter season, when we suddenly get an influx of people from Sacramento or from wherever they're coming from up to Apple Hill or like Lake Tahoe. But that's temporary, doesn't last very long, and we're still going to have to sacrifice a lot of that area just to accommodate tourists. And for us to maintain a small town, you can't start opening the doors to what the tourists need. You want to keep the doors open to what the actual community needs and wants. And based on what I'm hearing tonight, you know, the majority is against it. They bring up valid points on they're afraid that their opinion's not being truly considered. While we can sit and say that it is, the process of the plan and how far it's already come, it really doesn't seem like their opinion's truly being considered, because you're kind of just rolling through with it anyway. And again, this is my first city council meeting. I don't know everything that I've missed, but I'm just kind of putting this all together based on what I'm hearing from everyone else. And I have read online comments and whatnot on different forums that I've been visiting, which is what brought me here. So I just want to say that I second a lot of the opposition arguments. I understand the supportive arguments, but I don't think that they really do the full picture. Big picture. That's what I think we need to look at. Big picture. Not small picture, big picture. And what brings this concern up to me as well is I walked down here tonight, and on my way here, I saw a couple of buildings that are in pretty dire need of restoration. So it makes me wonder, you know, if we're going to put all of our time and energy and money into a roundabout, which we may or may not need, why am I seeing buildings that aren't being touched, that clearly could use plenty of restoration? And the Hangman's Tree, that was a big deal that finally got restored. We finally got support and funding to get that done. Well, that's just one thing. And from my understanding, it came from a private contributor rather than a public contributor. So if the public keeps putting focus on things that the community doesn't want, so that we have to get private people to come in here and get it done, that's a concern to me. So I guess that's all I have to say.
Thank you for joining us tonight. Good evening.
Good evening.
Hi,
I
Wilbur.
thought you started at 7 and I was eating dinner. I'm Wilbur Howe and I'm the owner of C&H Motor Parts. You know, I've heard everything and I was late so I missed some of it. I met with Nate about 2.5, 3 months ago about some stop signs on Cedar Ravine and widening, moving the center line on Pacific Street to improve the flow of traffic. We also looked at the maps that the city has had for a long time for an alternative to traffic flow from the hospital and the school up on the hill. He told me at that time, he says, I'm going to put in a order for stop signs and see where it goes. I must have gone anywhere because I haven't heard anything. I've spent the better part of my life in that intersection. It flows perfectly. With a little help from some cheap stop signs and the interrupting traffic just enough, it won't back up down here like it would if you had a roundabout. Number two is, to put a roundabout there, you're going to have at least 2 lanes, and that is not a big enough area. So I would like to have the council really look before you go off and check these stop signs out, and moving the line on Pacific Street probably about 18 inches would give you enough room to turn right or go towards the hospital, because people are doing it now and there's no, it's a little tight. And secondly, put it to the vote of the people. Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening. Sue Rodman, also a Placerville resident, who uses this intersection a lot. We're using federal highway funds, is my understanding. And my understanding is that if we are using federal funds, we must do NEPA as well as CEQA. We can't just do CEQA. And NEPA requires a no-action alternative that has equal analysis to the other alternatives. And it requires site-specific analysis. In other words, you must have real alternatives. And you can't have just straw man alternatives that you say, oh, these don't really matter, so we're not going to give them full analysis. Another thing that I think you're going to need to do if you're going to move forward with this is you need some hydrology. You need a really good hydrology study that needs a complete evaluation of the bridges and creeks and the coverings, such as Midtown Mall parking, over that Hangtown Creek all the way from Mosquito Road to Bedford. Because as I look at those, they do not appear to meet the 100-year storm event any better than the Clay Street Bridge. So why is only Clay Street under consideration here? Because that's what you put in for a project. Okay, so why would we put this in for a project? Who has property they want to develop that Clay Street would serve? I know Dave Machado has 14 acres above Cottonwood that he would like to develop. And who else would benefit? And when we get to CEQA and we're looking at growth-inducing impacts, that certainly would be a growth-inducing impact. Clay Street has already been vastly improved. There's a brand new street coming out of Cottonwood that connects into Mosquito Road. No one has answered me as to, okay, isn't that the Clay Street? It actually says Clay Street and comes right down by the new bus station where we did our community cleanup. So that was a good opportunity for anybody on the city council to have taken a look at the new Clay Street that comes out right there. Isn't that the Clay Street that was promised for Cottonwood? I still think the court order only requires an EIE if the project is still an option. And I think This still seems like a solution in search of a problem, and I think you do need to put this one to a vote. Otherwise, this has the potential to really divide this little city. And for other previous councils to brag on their accomplishments, I think they might have done a little better keeping our infrastructure together so we didn't need a Measure H and all of the water and sewer improvements that we are now struggling so hard to do.
Good evening.
Good evening. Michael Drobish, Placerville citizen. First of all, a project should be designed sufficiently enough that adequate analysis can be fully performed so that we don't find ourselves having an invalid EIR. And just a reminder to the public that while public comment is nice, it is written comments submitted to the city clerk that contain actual weight. Are there representatives of Fear and Peers or PMC here? No. Just looking at their proposal, it looks like they're going to analyze Bedford and 50 traffic flow. And I'm just thinking about the recent changes of the signalization where it does seem to flow better for the highway. It means that the local cross streets are now taking on a little more backup. So it did look like on page 5 they were going to analyze that.
And you do realize that that's just for this Apple Hill season?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Any other comments, Michael?
Yeah. And then, yes, there does need to be a fourth alternative. I'm sure it's just an oversight because no project is a requirement.
Well, let's get that answered. Will that be part of the EIR as proposed, Mr. Rivas?
Yes, that's correct. A no project is always an alternative required under CEQA.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that.
And then under their proposal too, it's stated that Fair and Peers will show a 2 to 3 minute simulation modeling the roundabout. Also, the bridge and creekside aesthetics. So I'm wondering why would they do computer modeling for just one of the alternatives? That seems a little president. They should, yeah, they should be showing computer modeling for all the options, signalization and stop sign and such, because it shows they're leaning a little too much one way.
Actually,
I had a question for PMC because per the court order, it says to set aside and void any and all approvals and findings, and maybe staff could answer this. Would adopted traffic studies and other studies of the previous project be considered findings? Were they approved under findings?
ask all your questions and we can get them answered, Michael.
Yes. And then 6, does PMC have past experience with roundabouts and EIRs? Because I'm concerned that if somebody's going to do this, they need to have enough experience so that they don't do an inadequate EIR. Okay. City gets sued and we lose a lot of money again.
Okay. Are those all your questions?
Just final, correct me if I'm wrong, this item could be tabled to a future date, then hold a public meeting focused on design options with full community input, as was mentioned at the community chat, and just informal designs from the public.
Okay.
Thanks.
Right. Let's get those questions answered. So how do the previous standings on the EIR relate to this current process?
Well, basically, the court just said that your previous approvals of the project, because you have to approve the environmental document before you approve the project. So the court basically said that the mitigated negative deck was invalid and that an EIR had to be prepared in order to consider the project. So therefore, the project approvals are set aside until you satisfy the CEQA requirement of preparing an adequate EIR.
Okay. And then does PMC have past experience with roundabouts and EIRs?
You know, I don't know if they have past experience with roundabouts. I know Fear and Piers does. Their subconsultant that's doing all the traffic studies. But PMC does have extensive background in doing and preparing environmental impact reports.
All right. Thank you for clarifying that. All right. Any other public comment before I close it? All right. With that point, we'll close public comment and bring it back to the council for discussion and action. Let's start with you, Vice Mayor Hagan.
Several comments. One, my number one is that I hear is from everybody in the public over the 9 years I've been on this council is that we need to do road repairs. We have, in this particular case, gone after funding before I came on this council, and I would imagine when the Clay Street projects were being built, so sometime probably 15 to 17 years ago when they started doing those projects on Clay Street was the connection between Mosquito Road and Main Street. Clay Street existed partway through. They continued it. And so one of the requirements of that by the Planning Commission and the public and all the hearings was that we fix the bridge or at least make the road wide enough so that 2 cars can get past there. And I think it was during the investigations of that they found out there was federal highway funding available to fix the bridge. That said, so that's a requirement of the developer. Those funds were set aside. Those funds are still part of that. And when you qualify for federal highway bridge repairs, somewhere between 10 and 15% is the city's share of that. So we have approximately $4.5 million or $5 million or $3 million of funding that's federal funding on this that is for bridge repair. That includes 200 feet on each side. So it also allows us to address the issue of Clay and Main Street intersection because it's within that area. So even if we leave the current alignment alone, which is one of the options that we're studying, the alignment then has to be addressed for traffic. My understanding is that one of the reasons we have traffic impact mitigation fees is because of traffic flow, and traffic interchanges, intersections are rated based upon a number of, like you get when you go to school. That one currently or in the near future, very near future, is rated at F, level F. So that means, one, you can't do anything beyond there, and we still have this direction of our former city council or the legislative body to fix that bridge and widen that area to at least 2 lanes. Again, the requirements today are substantially different than they were back in the 90s, early 90s when that was approved. 2 lanes is not adequate. You have to include, or it should include, bike and pedestrian travel in that area. So whether we put sidewalks or we put a pedestrian walkway separate from the bridge next to it and into that parking lot, that's the idea. So what I see is that we've got an EIR coming in that will address all of the requirements that the court said we need to address, and we have 4 options. One is, on every time you have an EIR, there's a do-nothing option. That's a standard on an EIR. Design with the current alignment, design with stoplights, stop signs, stoplights, or a roundabout. That's 4 options. I have not a preconceived, I personally have a preferred alternative, but that's mine based on the amount of work I've done in the traffic area and transportation area. But at this point, I'm willing to look at all 4 of those options and see what we can do to improve the road, improve the Clay Street so that it is adequate for pedestrians and vehicle traffic. I'd say currently it's not adequate for traffic. 1.5 lanes is not adequate for 2 cars to get by. 1.5 lanes is not adequate for pedestrians. 1.5 lanes is not adequate for bicycle traffic. That's my primary concern on this whole thing. I understand the process of design. We have looked at a couple of design bids, if you will, and I think we could spend a great deal of money on design and not know what kind of things. I think during this process, we'll probably come up with some designs. I'm not so sure that we can get a good public discourse. I hope that during this EIR process we're able to. I believe the Highway Federal Bridge Funding Act is a state fund, so it does not require NEPA, but I would defer to the professional, Mr. Rivas. Do we need a NEPA study on this?
I believe there is a NEPA clearance that will be required.
And that's done as part of the EIR and part of the requirements that...
You know, staff can certainly look more into it, but I believe I saw some of the tasks for the NEPA clearances in the Quincy reports.
Okay.
The project report.
During the bridge design reports.
Yes.
Okay. I think we already have done some of that for the trail work and the prior bridge work.
I believe so, but
Okay.
I'd have to look at those documents.
Thank you. That's all I have. And we don't know which option. To me, they're equal weight. I'm sorry, Mr. Berry, I was pretty quiet when you were
Mr.
chatting.
Berry, public comment is closed. Thank you. Mr. Berry,
you.
public comment is closed. Excuse me. Point of order. Excuse me. No. He did. This is at the council's. Please sit down. Thank you. Vice Mayor Hagan?
And I'll stop at that point.
All right. Councilmember Wilkins.
My concern I had was that it looks like in this, the roundabout is preferred. Task number 10, we get this high-tech visual simulation of the roundabout, but we don't have it for the other options. So my fear is that we're going to have roundabout salesmen like Patrick McGreedy come with his awkward videos and trying to show them to the public to show how wonderful these roundabouts work everywhere else. And so back in May, we were asked if we would like to proceed with an EIR that included a roundabout, and I said no, and nothing has changed. And it feels, I'm sorry, but it feels like the roundabout is getting crammed down the public's throat, and I'm not going to be a part of it.
Thank you. Councilmember Borelli.
Well, I have to totally disagree with my council member Wilkins. I don't think I'm trying to push anything down anyone's throat. I think that this, what's being proposed tonight, is a fair way to give us all the options, and especially to have them drawn by professionals. We're going to be able to see once and for all the impacts, what they are, how many, or whatever. And I just think that this, I really feel as though that's a fair way. We've heard several people say they want to put this to the vote of the public. Well, if we don't have adequate plans to show them, to show the public what we're really going after, what's the vote? I don't know what we're voting for if we can't. I mean, we don't even know. It hasn't been presented to us. So I just don't go along with the vote issue right now. I'm also really, really sick of being accused of having my reason for doing this is to benefit some developer. I have no clue as to anybody that wants to build anything up there or that would benefit from this. I am looking at this from a point of view of improving that corner, whether it be just the bridge, whether it be the alignment, whether the stop signs, whatever it is. I don't care what anybody says. I think you're just totally blind if you are saying that that corner is beautiful and adequate. It's a mess up there. And I was there the other day at the farmer's market, and I thought, this is horrible. And if whatever we can do to improve it, we need to do it. We've got the funding that would help us to improve something up there. And I think it needs to be done. And also, we keep hearing how we're going to destroy the farmer's market. We're not going to destroy the farmer's market. As near as I can figure out, the things that we've proposed and the folks that we're working with who are in charge of the farmer's market, they've been in agreement that what we are proposing is an ideal thing for them. It would give them a lot more room. It would make the parking better. It would free up that corner so that the regular traffic flow can flow during Saturday mornings. And I don't quite frankly see anything wrong with improving all the area along the creek to have, it's been presented, we would have benches for people to be able to sit down. They can buy food at the market. They can go and picnic. I don't see anything wrong with that, and I don't see what's wrong with that kind of an improvement. Also, it's been mentioned about Marshall Hospital. To my knowledge, Marshall Hospital has never been to any of these meetings to tell us yay or nay. But in my personal conversations with them, they're not against a roundabout. So I don't know where all this information is coming that you all know that I don't. I don't understand it. And there's a lot of stuff, whenever anybody's against something, all these rumors get started. And that's exactly what a lot of this misconception is. And I, quite frankly, I don't think that this is a waste of money to have this done the way that it's being proposed by our staff tonight.
Thank you, Councilmember Borelli. Councilmember Patton.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As most of you know, I've come out publicly in support of the roundabout over the years. I was on the Planning Commission when the Cottonwood development was approved and was mitigated with, we imposed the mitigation fees to improve Clay Street at the Hangtown Creek Bridge. And yes, Clay Street does hook up to Mosquito, and that our general plan, which I don't know how many people actually know the general plan, but any new subdivision of the size Cottonwood is supposed to have two methods of ingress and egress. And that being said, if you looked at Cottonwood or at Clay Street and Main Street, you can see that it cannot support the amount of traffic from the Cottonwood. Whatever is beyond Cottonwood is a whole nother story. And the insinuation that this project is doing something for the benefit of someone beyond is actually just an insult to not only this group that's here today, but the group that was here 20 years ago when this came to the commission and subsequently to the council. Today, obviously, we are at a junction where there is opposition based on, I have to agree with Councilmember Borelli, with innuendo and not really based on facts. If we have a clear, I agree that the traffic analysis that was done for the original project didn't look at Bedford and Main Street, didn't look at the impacts of what would happen if there was free-flowing traffic from Upper Main Street to Bedford, intersection at Bedford. It didn't look at the impacts of free-flowing traffic to Pacific Street. And yet, as I drove through that intersection yesterday, we already have free-flowing traffic from eastbound Main Street onto Cedar Ravine to Pacific Street. We already have, in essence, a roundabout at one section of that intersection. It is you don't stop, it's just a yield. So the idea, and then, I don't know if you remember, but back in May, we had a little, a document from the city that said when the Druid Monument was first built, it was a roundabout. Back in whatever, 1940s, 1911, I don't remember the date. But it was a roundabout to begin with, and then over the years, as if stop signs could fix it, stop signs were put in and established, and that's what we have today. I'm willing at this particular moment, out of respect for the council that's here today, to go through the process, let's look at the traffic analysis, let's look at it with today's standards and say, okay, context-sensitive design. Let's look at what could a bridge look like in a community that believes that walking and biking and handicapped accessibility are important to us. Let's look at what can we do to that bridge to make it better. And at-grade pedestrian sidewalk, if you will, to the asphalt of the driveway, of the roadway, is not conducive, not to bikes, not to pedestrians, and certainly not to wheelchairs. And I've seen more than one wheelchair try to make their way, first of all, the intersection at Main Street and Clay Street, but then to go across that bridge. And it's not how I want to live in a community. It is functionally obsolete. It has been determined to be functionally obsolete. I didn't make that determination, but that's what it's called, and that's how we can, as a small community, afford to improve that bridge, to make it so it functions for all of our citizens. I would encourage the council to go ahead and let's go through the EIR process. Let's get the traffic analysis done. Let's do the design phases before the council picks a preferred alternative, so that the members of the community have their chance at input. Because that's when you do it. You do it when you're building the project. The project isn't built. There are 4 alternatives that we're looking at, and that's the way it's done. You don't just get to, at any rate, that's how it's done. And I believe that what Mr. Rivas and what Mr. Sorry, what the city manager has brought forward is a fair project that we can move forward as a community. We can be the leaders of the community. We can hopefully build respect so that everyone feels like they're part of the community. And I would just like to go on record as saying that I would just like to have a respectful dialogue, because I'm not looking out for some developer on some future project. This is something that came down over 20 years ago that I would like to see to its whatever end it's going to be at.
Thank you so much. My final comments before we get to an action. First of all, I respectfully challenge Councilmember Wilkins' suggestion that this council is pushing a roundabout. People, of course, have individual opinions regarding this, no doubt, but to suggest that as a legislative body we have made a decision on a roundabout is absolutely false. I also challenge Ms. Taylor's comments. I did not say I would drop the project. I did say I would not support a roundabout if I didn't feel there was strong, broad-based community support, and I do stand by that. We are, as Vice Mayor Hagan suggested, we are mandated by the legislative bodies of the past to fix the Clay Street Bridge. There's money in that fact. That project gives us the opportunity to improve the parking lot, to fix the lower hangout problem that is just a problem area and will continue to be there. It gives us the opportunity to improve the trail and the farmers market, to add parking to this impacted section of town. And while I said that I would not approve or stand by a roundabout if there was not broad-based support, what I do strongly support is intersection improvements. I favor a realignment. I favor improvements to the bridge, pedestrian, traffic-wise. I favor improving that parking lot that is rutted and decrepit and hard to get in and out of. I favor improving the farmers market. And while I agree with my council members' comments, let's have a respectful decision. Let's go through this process together and then make an informed decision. I think we're at a juncture that I have no faith that we can have a respectful, productive discussion on this as long as a roundabout is on the table. So I will stand by my vote on May 11th. I would like to see the roundabout pulled. Do I think it would work and be beautiful? Yes, I do. I think it could be a gorgeous project. I don't believe we can do this together, though, as long as the roundabout's on the table. So I would favor, once again, as I said on May 14th, pulling the roundabout option, then proceeding with an EIR, looking at this project, looking at the realignment, and fixing this intersection once and for all, and making it really a cornerstone of this community that could be absolutely beautiful. So that's where I stand on this issue.
I have one thing to say, just
Okay.
to clarify.
Yes.
I want to apologize if any of you thought that I'm
Turn your
sorry.
mic on.
I want to apologize if it was taken that I meant any member of our council has that personal. I don't mean that you are cramming it down the throats. I mean the way that it's been going, and we have to approve these things, and every time we approve something, it's just in favor. So that's the clarification I wanted to say.
Any other further comments or action on this?
I'll move that we adopt the resolution as outlined by staff report and direct the staff to prepare the design workshops in conjunction with the EIR at appropriate times as the information becomes available.
Second.
It's been moved by Vice Mayor Hagan and seconded by Council Member Patton.
I'd like to add one thing to that too. I'd like to, at this point, so that we make sure that we have sufficient number of public hearings, that we add 2 additional design workshops to that as part of the contract. So amend the contract so that we do that. Is that okay with you?
I'll
Cheryl?
amend my second.
Okay. We have amended first and second. May we have a roll call vote, please?
Councilmember Borelli.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Hagan.
Aye.
Councilmember Patton.
Aye.
Mayor Thomas.
No.
Councilmember Wilkins.
No. Okay, motion carries. Thank you. All right. And with that, we move on to council reports. Let's